my chameleon Venus broke her jaw, and I want to talk about everything that led up to that, the recovery after the fact, and really use this as a learning opportunity for anyone who's interested in owning chameleons and potentially breeding them. So without further ado, let's get into the video. This is going to be a hard video to be like bubbly and chipper, because honestly, this has been a really rough few months. This happened in February and it's been really difficult to go through. But I wanted to take this as an opportunity to educate, because I feel like no one really talks about the realities of breeding chameleons and the potential risks that come with breeding chameleons. I unfortunately experienced it firsthand. I want to share my experience for anyone who might be interested. It's not unheard of, and it's not like people aren't aware. Let me put it a different way. People know that breeding reptiles is not the most pleasant of things. In nature, we like to think everything's all sunshine and rainbows, but like there's some spider species that literally eat the males after mating with them. So there's plenty of reptile species that when they breed is like not a pleasant thing. I believe crested geckos, it is like the males will bite the female's head to like pin them down and hold them in place. If Leachianus geckos aren't a good fit, a good pairing, like I've known females who have like killed males. So it's not like it's like a pleasant thing, but no one talks about the dangers of breeding chameleons specifically. So I obviously want to share my experience and my knowledge. Leading up to this, I have multiple breeding mentors. To be very clear, like I have at least 3 people that have years and years of chameleon experience that have been mentoring me for like the last year and a half, ever since I got Neptune. And I got her with the intention of breeding her with Neptune. I got her when she was a little peanut, raised her up. I've been consistently weighing her, watching her colors, being mindful of her care and everything, very much with the intention of breeding her with Neptune. So once she was over a year old, was the appropriate size, and started showing receptive colors, I knew it was go time, and it was time to start introducing her to Neptune. Now, chameleons are always kept separately in their own enclosures, and then we put them together once they are ready to be mated with. So what is usually recommended is to take the female and put them in the male enclosure. People have the most success with that. That seems to go well for most chameleons. Obviously, every chameleon pairing is slightly different, and some females prefer the opposite. But generally speaking, we put the females in the male enclosure. So once Venus was showing receptive colors, I got her onto a stick. I was just showing her to Neptune outside of the enclosure, right? Just to let them see each other and see how they would respond. Neptune was immediately head bobbing, which was a very promising sign, trying to pursue her. Venus looked a little hesitant, but like not anything crazy. From what I've heard from other breeders, the females will sometimes be hesitant or be a little defensive, and then once the males pursue them and mount them, then they are totally fine. So I was very much paying close attention. I gave it a couple of days because the receptive window with chameleons is very small, and you kind of have to wait for the stars to align. What ended up happening, just to like fast forward a little bit, is I put Venus in with Neptune. She got a little defensive, but like I said, this is not uncommon. This is very normal behavior. Neptune was bobbing, pursuing her. Venus gaped, like opened her mouth, and then ended up lunging at Neptune. And in that kind of contact, she ended up breaking her jaw. And I was watching the entire time, I promise you. I had my sticks ready to go to like intervene and separate them. I pulled her out immediately. I saw that her jaw was like misshapen and kind of dangling there. I'll include pictures. They're a little blurry because I was shaking, because I was like freaking out because of what just happened. Yeah, and so before getting into like Venus's recovery, I just want to call out that like breeding chameleons is not for the faint of heart. And I know a lot of breeders personally, and I told them about what happened to Venus, and they weren't surprised. Like they've never had, like breaking her jaw was obviously extreme, but like they weren't surprised that there was a fight and that it didn't necessarily go well. Typically it's the males who are the aggressors, not the females. So I just want to share some things, in that there have been female panther chameleons who have had their tails bitten off, like where they just have nubs. There have been females who have actually been killed by male chameleons. So this is not like happy-go-lucky, everyone gets along with each other breeding. Like obviously there are instances where there aren't any reactions between chameleons, but it's not uncommon and it's not unheard of. So for anyone who's interested in breeding their chameleons, like, I just want to caution you and warn you of the risks that can come with it, and be fully prepared to intervene, which I'm so happy I was there to like separate them, because who knows what could have happened. A little bit of a freak accident, I think, is because the angle of how she hit Neptune is what caused her jaw to break. So now back to Venus's situation, because dealing with a chameleon that has a broken jaw is like not a normal thing to deal with. And I don't know of any YouTube videos out there that talk you through how that process is. So once I took Venus out of the enclosure, I saw that her jaw and lip were messed up. Like, her lip skin was flipped, her jaw was kind of messed up. Neptune had sustained some injuries, but his did not seem as like life-threatening as Venus's were. And I'll make a separate video on Neptune's injuries and his whole healing process. But I drove Venus to an emergency vet. I'm lucky enough that I have an exotic vet that's 24/7 emergency in my area. So I called them, I was like, I'm on my way, here's the situation, drove her there. On the drive there, her lip did flip back up. Her jaw is obviously deformed and broken, and like the skin didn't look quite right and was like torn in the side. It was really not good. I drove her there. They rushed her immediately into the back. I got put in an exam room. I was there for probably like 45 minutes before anyone came out and like gave me any updates. And the last time that I was at a vet like that was when I was there with Apollo, and he didn't end up making it. So like, it was honestly like not fun to be sitting in that room by myself. So would not recommend. They came to the conclusion that there wasn't anything that they could really do for Venus at this point, and what they wanted was to have the exotic vet see her first thing in the morning that has like experience with things like this. So they gave her pain meds, they gave her antibiotics, and like, you can leave her overnight and they can see her first thing, or you can take her home and then bring her back in the morning. It was like a couple $100s just to leave her overnight, and she wasn't in any sort of like life-threatening condition. She was very stable. And they had given her pain meds and stuff like that. So I was like, you know what, I'll just bring her home. I'll wake up at 6 a.m., 5 a.m., whatever, and bring her back. So that's what I did, and then dropped her off. That was honestly really, really hard, was to leave her there and not be there. I know like reptiles don't care about us, but like, I obviously care a lot about her and like wanted to be there for her, as silly as that sounds. So then I go back home. I eventually get a call from the vet. They did do x-rays and confirmed that she had broken her jaw in 2 spots, one on the side of her jaw and then right in the front of her jaw. And so they were recommending that she have surgery to get all that like fixed up and stuff. And so I gave them the go ahead to do the surgery. They consulted with other exotic vets who have experience with broken jaws, and so they came up with a good game plan, and that they were going to attach a fixator. So it was basically like a toothpick, but not a toothpick, a little piece of wood that they sutured along to the jaw as a fixator to hold the bone in place. They did try to stitch and suture the break that was in the center of her mouth, but they weren't able to do it because their mouths are so small. So they did suture that, and she came out of the surgery without any issues. It's always nerve-wracking putting reptiles under anesthesia because they're just so little and so fragile. And then eventually I got to go and pick her up and see her little fixator. They walked me through all of her care and recommendations, pain meds, antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, like she was on a bunch of different medication. What we had decided as a good game plan was to put Venus in a temporary enclosure, something that was sterile. Her enclosure has live plants, it has pots of dirt in it, it's got branches, it's got all kinds of different things that could potentially get in her wound, in her injury. So we wanted to put her in something that was sterile. So I put her into a temporary enclosure that just had branches and fake vines, fake leaves in it, and then just paper towel, like a towel at the bottom. Obviously, I love to keep my chameleons on bioactive and live plants, but in the instance of Venus, the last thing we want is for something to get in there, a little piece of dirt or whatever, and then it become infected. So she was in that temporary setup while her fixator healed. Reptiles take a long time to heal. She had to wear that fixator for about a month before it was removed. During that whole time, I had to give her antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, and pain meds. It's been a few months now because this was back in February, so I don't remember the exact cadence of what I did when, but it was like every 3 days, I think it was her antibiotic, and then daily I had to give her pain meds and anti-inflammatories. Those, pro tip, I just injected into a bug. I asked for a little needle for the syringe and I just poked like a waxworm or a hornworm. Hornworms worked really good. Just poked it and injected the worm with it and then fed that to her because Venus is a very defensive chameleon. The antibiotics had to go into her upper arm area and we had to rotate sides of which side we put it in. I say we because I ended up having to enlist the help of my friend Lissa's Lizards. Luckily, she lives close by. So she would come over every 3 days and help me administer the medicine to Venus. I don't know how anyone would do this by themselves because you basically have to hold your chameleon with one hand and then inject them with a needle with the other. Even if you had a chameleon that wasn't super defensive, no one wants to get stabbed with the needle. So we came up with a pretty good process and routine in that I would just gently hold Venus down on the ground and then Lissa would inject her arm. Some people like to grab from behind the head. That seemed to be more stressful for Venus than just holding her down and kind of like covering her eyes so she couldn't see what was happening. And we were super efficient, super quick with it. So it was like a couple seconds tops. So that worked out really well for us. Another thing during her recovery is I only fed her soft-bodied worms. So I didn't feed her anything like crickets or roaches, anything with a hard exoskeleton. I stuck to black soldier fly larvae, hornworms, waxworms, and silkworms, at least for like the first 2 weeks, and then I started adding in roaches back into her diet just to keep it easy for her jaw and everything for her to chew and digest. So after about a month of her having the fixator on and being in the sterile enclosure, I then brought her back for her checkup, and then they removed the fixator after a month. Oh wait, hold on. So I had a checkup appointment. She still had her fixator on. They wanted to keep it on, but wanted to do another round of antibiotics. Then after a month, because her checkup was like two weeks after, I think, her surgery. Then we had another one 2 weeks after that. So yeah, that's tracking. So she had a fixator for about a month. Then they removed that. We had to do another round of antibiotics, which was, again, not fun because I was every 3 days having to stab her with a little needle. Once her fixator came off, it was scabbed pretty good. I just left the scab. It looked clean. Nothing looked swollen or discolored. I kept a close eye on it. Once she had that scab on there though, then I was able to put her back in her normal enclosure with her live plants and everything else. It took the scab another few weeks to come off. I just let it come off on its own because I'm not trying to like pick at that, and you're not supposed to pick scabs anyways. I'm certainly not going to do it on my chameleon. So eventually her scab came off. It has a nice scar on it. The break in the front of her mouth never went back together, so it's a little split in the front and then a nice scar on the side there, but she's able to eat fine. Her tongue functions great. She can chew great. Everything else is totally normal. She just looks a little Frankenstein-y. Something that was a concern during this whole process was her and her egg laying, because females who lay eggs have to dig in the dirt. They dig head first, turn around, lay their eggs, and then cover them back up. And Venus was receptive, which tells me that she has follicles. In fact, when they x-rayed, like you could see the follicles, like the eggs, not the eggs themselves starting to form, but like the follicles starting to form. So I knew she had eggs coming soon, which was the whole point of why I was trying to mate her, so that it would be fertilized. And so what I was really nervous for was her becoming egg bound or not having any way to lay the eggs while she had the fixator on, because the vet was like very clear that she cannot be digging with the fixator on because then it's just high risk for infection. Thank goodness she was able to lay her eggs after the fixator came off and everything. That was like a couple weeks, a good chunk of time, honestly, afterwards, that she was able to lay her eggs without her fixator on. So Venus has since laid an infertile clutch. She is healthy, she is good. Her mouth, while it looks a little crazy, is structurally sound. She can eat and everything else. So Yeah, I'll pause there. It's obviously been a lot to deal with. I haven't posted about it up until this point because I just wanted to make sure that Venus was okay, if I'm being honest. Like, I know if I had posted about it when it happened, you guys would lovingly be checking in all the time, and I just wanted to kind of like make sure that she was okay as my top priority. Now that I know she's good, I'm happy to share this with you guys. I just want to caution anyone who's interested in breeding chameleons that you are aware of the risks that come with it. The last thing I want to talk about was the cost of everything. Everyone knows exotic vets are not cheap, but my chameleon had jaw surgery, which is pretty wild. So I was gonna walk through the cost. I also had to go to the emergency vet, so I actually have her invoices here. So the emergency vet ended up being $236.97. That included an exam consult of $170, biohazard disposal fee, and then hydromorphone, that was the pain medication, which was like $55. So that ended up being $236.97 just for her emergency visit, which honestly I feel like is not terrible to have like an emergency vet. Now, where it gets a little hefty on pricing is obviously her surgery. So one of the big fees was the exam board specialist consult. So the vet visit itself was $205, and then her x-rays were $278.55. Reptile x-rays are not cheap, and they're always over like $200. So it's $278 just for the x-rays. Then this is a whole bunch of medication, alfalaxone, $38, miscellaneous surgery. So the surgery itself was $200, midazolam, oh gosh, that was $37, ketamine, $37. This says iStat, CG8 plus Abaxis, $85, meloxicam, $29, ceftazidime injection, $59, aflaxolone, again, additional $29, biohazard waste thing, $23, and then controlled drug compliance fee, $5. So all of that, her surgery and the x-rays and everything else was $1,029.50. Then I had 2 additional follow-up appointments, which were $69 a piece. So all in all, for Venus's medical care, her surgery, her x-rays, her medication, everything else totaled to $1,404.47. So I am very mindful and appreciative that I'm in a financial place where I can afford to cover that for Venus, but I always say have an emergency fund for your reptiles, for your pets, because it's not an if, it's a when, and of course we want to be prepared. I'll be honest, normally I would say like, you know, $500 would be fine, because that would be in the instance of like a normal vet visit and some medication or something, or even a couple x-rays. But yeah, maybe you need $1,400 in case your chameleon breaks her jaw and has to have emergency surgery. Yeah, just of course very grateful that I was in a place that I could do that for her. So what's next for Venus and Neptune? I would like to do an update video on Neptune because he did also sustain some injuries, and I want to explain that whole situation, his whole healing process, his vet visits, his vet costs, and everything else. But I will keep you guys in the loop. I'm just not ready to talk about what the next steps are for them, but I promise I will let you know when I am ready. So thank you guys so much for watching and for the support along the years, along the way. It just means a lot. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave any questions or comments down below. Feel free to subscribe so you don't post a new video. You can follow Neptune and all my chameleons on social media at Neptune the Chameleon. Feel free to check out my website, neptunethechameleon.com. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. And hopefully use this as a learning opportunity.